This lecture will serve as an introduction to Islam. So, one thing that I find that's kind of tricky in talking about Islam is that people are often saying, well, Islam is this, Islam is that, Islam is X, Islam is Y, right? They're trying to identify and say, this is what the real Islam is, this is what the true Islam is. And I have some problems with that. I don't think you can just say Islam is one thing. Now, the reason though why people want to ask that question is because the way it's answered can support different positions on government policy. So, for example, some people would argue that Islam is inherently violent and dangerous to democracy. And if that's the position you take, you're probably going to have a certain view on immigration. You're also probably going to take a more aggressive foreign policy view towards Muslim majority countries. On the other hand, people will take the opposite view, say, no, Islam is fundamentally about peace. It's a religion of peace. And therefore, I'm going to take a different view, a different perspective on foreign policy and on immigration. And those are kind of extreme views, but I find that they're quite common. And my argument as a historian who specializes in religion is that Islam is many different things to Muslims depending on when and where they live or have lived. And you could insert the name of any religion in here. Buddhism is many different things to Buddhists depending on when and where they live. Christianity is many different things to Christians depending on when and where they live. Think about a small town in South Carolina like Greenwood. How many different Christian churches are there? And even people within a single Christian church are likely to disagree. So I don't think we can really say a whole lot about Islam as a whole from all times and all places at once, other than something very basic. And we certainly can't make, very, very strong claims in regards to foreign policy or immigration or something like that. Islam is many different things to Muslims, depending on when and where they live. And one thing I hope to get in this class is some understanding of that diversity, that Muslims are different. To continue, we need to get some vocabulary right. So first of all, Islam is the religion. A Muslim is a follower of the religion. So sometimes students have trouble because they're like, okay, a follower of Buddhism is a Buddhist, a follower of Christianity is a Christian, therefore a follower of Islam is an Islam. And they'll talk about Islams. That's not correct. Islam is the religion, Muslim is the person who follows the religion. So we want to make sure we get that right. The reason we use these terms is it's the terms that Muslims use to talk about themselves. Right? So as much as possible, I like to use the term that people use to refer to themselves. What do these terms mean? Islam literally means submission. Submission to whom? Submission to God. A Muslim is one who submits. Right? Submits to who? To God. And that makes logical sense. And I like to talk about that because that is really, in many ways, key to Islam. This idea of submitting to God's will. The one God, right? Muslims are monotheists. Now, to kind of continue, one thing I try and do in this class when I talk about religion is to describe it in as simple a way as possible, because this isn't a religion class, but also in a way that would be recognizable to people who believe and follow that religion, right? So when I talked about Buddhism and Christianity, I tried to explain it in a way that would make sense, both to people who know nothing of the religion, but also where people who are members of that religion could say, yeah, that's pretty close to what I believe. So if you were to, remember, I said, if you were to ask a Christian, or if you were to ask a Buddhist, right, what's the core of your belief? They may say the Four Noble Truths. If you were to ask a Muslim, what is the core of your belief? They might say the 5 pillars of Islam. Now I want to point out, the Quran does not talk about the 5 pillars of Islam. I don't think the Hadith do either. This is something that Muslims later on developed as a way to understand their faith. So it's kind of a theological understanding. It's not like it's listed like the 10 Commandments. But in any case, I think it is core. And I think many Muslims would say, yep, those are key aspects of our faith. So the first pillar is the confession of faith. There is no God but God, and Muhammad is his prophet. Now, sometimes people will say, like, there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. But the problem is, it's the same word in Arabic. Allah just means God, and Arab Christians call God Allah. So it sounds kind of weird to say, just to just translate one Allah into God and leave the other Allah. It's there is no God but God, and Muhammad is his prophet. Right? So the basic belief is that you believe in God. One God. And the other part of that belief, when they say Muhammad is his prophet, it means Muhammad is the seal of the prophets. Now, by seal, I don't mean an aquatic animal. It's like when you in the old days, when you wrote a letter and you used wax to seal it, and now the letter can't be opened except for by the person who's supposed to receive it. That's what it means. It means he's the last one. Right? Muhammad is the ultimate prophet. He's the last one. There's no more prophets. That's what's meant here. So there is no God but God, monotheism, and Muhammad is his prophet. Muhammad is God's prophet, but he's the ultimate prophet. He is going to give us the perfect revelation, the Quran. Another aspect of it is prayer. Ideally, it's 5 times a day. And when I say prayer, I don't mean, like in a sense, like if you're a Christian, you could pray and people wouldn't notice you praying, right? If you just prayed in your mind. But this kind of prayer is a communal prayer typically. It doesn't have to be, but ideally you would go to a mosque. You would perform certain ritual actions, for example, ritual bathing of hands and feet. You'd wash out your mouth with water. And then you would engage in some ritual acts where you would bow and so forth while praying. Ideally, you would do this 5 times a day, but that's an ideal. It's not required because you may have to, work, right? Fasting, and typically this is during Ramadan. Islamic fasting is a little bit different from like Jewish or Christian fasting because it's from sun up to sundown, so you can eat after sundown, and that can be really hard if you're in a place where the night's not very long. Also, usually fasting means not drinking as well. So this is like a difficult thing for Muslim athletes during the holy month of Ramadan. They won't drink, which you can imagine would make practice very hard. But they're serious about their religion. They're going to follow it. Another aspect is giving to charity. Right? And finally, very important idea, pilgrimage to Mecca, what Muslims call the Hajj. This is encouraged, but not absolutely required. If you're poor, if you're sick, if you're too elderly, you don't have to do this. But if you have the money sometime in your life, you are expected to do this, to go to Mecca and perform pilgrimage. And this is kind of an interesting thing because what it does is it would bring Muslims from all over the Muslim world together, and they could talk to each other and share ideas and things like that. But I think this gives you kind of an idea of just some central teachings of Islam that we'll be referring back to as we continue this. But it's good to have an idea of some of the core beliefs of a religion while we talk about that religion.